ines-luca, and I am doing my project on missions, on the California missions. So today, I'm going to show you around Mission Santa Ines. So I put a lot of work into this mission, and hopefully it's going to be really cool. So, before you see the mission, there's some information that I really think that you should know. Did you know that the Mission Santa Ines is 35 miles north of Santa Barbara, near the Santa Ynez River? The mission was established in 1804 by Father Esteban Tapiz as the 19th mission along El Camino Real. And there's 21 missions, so it was almost the last mission to be made. Esteban Tapiz founded the mission Santa Ynez because there were so many Chumash Indians who wished to become a part of the mission's life, and Mission Santa Barbara and Mission La Purisma were too far apart and were overcrowded. So now I'm going to show you the mission. So this is the mission, and first I'm going to show you the reservoir. So the reservoir was a big lake or body of water that it was used for all of the water supply and all of the water in the mission. Now I'm going to show you the graveyard. And so in the graveyard, there were Indians, Chumash Indians, and a lot of the Indians, and then there were also warriors and sometimes priests and some a lot of important religious people. So now I'm going to show you the corral. So the corral is where there'd be a lot the animals, and this is where the animals would be. They could roam free because they were stuck in little pens all day. And so, did you know at one point Santa Ynez had 6,000 heads of cattle, 5,000 sheep, 120 goats, 150 pigs, 120 pack mules, and 770 horses. And that's a lot, by the way. So they'd have to sometimes they'd bring animals to a lot of the local missions. So now this is a pen, and what I walked through is just like this little, it was kind of just like a passage sort of that they'd use to bring the cattle back to the pen and through the passage to the area where they could roam free, the corral. So now I'm going to show you the church. And the church was used for praying and sometimes, just mainly praying and stuff like that. So now here's this balcony thing, and this is sometimes the choir would play here, and people would play piano up here. There wasn't that much stuff that would go in here. Now I'm going to show you the living quarters. Okay, so this is the living quarters in here. And this is where the guards and the warriors and some soldiers would sleep. And they were right here, so they could easily just come out and guard. And now here's just an office. The office didn't have any door. And here is the priest's office. And both the priest's office and the office didn't have any doors because there were a lot of important stuff in the offices, and especially the priest's office because he had his bed here and a lot of his belongings. Although he didn't have that many stuff in there because mainly what he'd do was outside in the garden sometimes he would work and he'd be in the church a lot. And he wouldn't necessarily always be in his office. So, now I'm going to show you the garden. So this is the garden, and there was a big fountain in the middle of the garden, and a lot of flowers and stuff. So I think the very cool part of the garden was that it was a big cross. And I thought that was a very, very cool thing that they made for the garden, because that really, really represents the California missions, and it would represent like God and stuff like that. So this is a blacksmith, and before I'm going to show you in the workshops and the blacksmiths and the tannery, I'm going to tell you some stuff about the work of the Indians. So the work of the Indian men at the mission was to plow and the plant crops, and making and laying adobe bricks, and making a lot of just stuff, and soaking corn and hides, and tanning the hides, and they'd make candles, and sometimes they'd make shoes and saddles from leather. And so the church was known for many of the special skills that the Indians had, such as working with leather and metal. The Indians made fancy saddles decorated with silver and candlesticks and other objects from copper and silver. So here's the blacksmiths. Their bee chest, or a container, and they'd have sometimes just places where they could melt and stuff like that, and stones that they could just use. And in the blacksmith, they'd mainly work with copper and silver, and they'd make a lot of stuff with copper and silver, because that was mainly what they would make. Now I'm going to show you the tannery. So the tannery was not where the Indians could go out, sit out in the sun and get a suntan. Instead, it was really where they'd make leather. So what they would do is they'd get the leather of the cow when the cow was dead, or if something, let's say, had to be urgent, they might just kill the cow, because they had a lot of cows, so it didn't really matter if one was spared. And so there'd be a lot of stuff, and in here they would they'd skin the hide of the cow, then they'd press it, then they'd soak it in a bunch of water for a little, then they press it with some metal thing or stone, and they'd do that process about 10 times, and after it was done, they'd get a container or a chest or a box, and they'd fill that box, container, or chest, or just anything that could hold salt. They'd fill it with salt, and then they'd put the cowhide in there for about a month or two for it to dry, and then they'd have leather. So now this is the workshops. So the workshops, there was just there wasn't that much work done in here, because mainly a lot of the stuff was for the cattle in the garden. But sometimes people could just make stuff, and they would make stuff. They'd make fancy saddles, like I said before, decorated with silver and candlesticks and other objects made of copper and silver, and just stuff like that. And that's the workshops. So, yes, I've shown everything in Mission Santa Ynez. So, thank you for listening to my video.